The tea was cold before I finished the first sentence of the report. That was the thing nobody warned you about in diplomatic liaison training. Not the moral weight. Not the exhaustion of translating grief into bullet points. It was the tea. You poured it hot. The galaxy caught fire somewhere else. And by the time you looked up, you were drinking lukewarm regret in a mug that said I survived my posting to the Ryle Rift in 5 languages. My name is Samir Kahlo, Senior Diplomatic Observer, United Earth External Affairs. Stationed on the Veth Accord platform, Orbital Ring 3, overlooking the border between Veth Space and the Kal Dominion. I had been here for 14 months. I had processed 211 formal communications in that time. I remembered with uncomfortable precision the temperature of every beverage I had abandoned mid-sip when something urgent arrived. The signal came in at 9:47 platform time. I remember because I had just checked the clock, calculating whether I had time to reheat the tea before the morning briefing. The intake system flagged it as Tier 4, Routine Inquiry. Below that was basically someone asking for a trade schedule. My assistant, a meticulous young woman named Yuki Tan, whose entire personality appeared to be a calm, efficient surface over deep and patient competence, transferred it to my terminal with a note that read, Kal Dominion, status check on border observation post. Recommend standard acknowledgement. She had, I noticed, already drafted the acknowledgement. Professional. Correct. Entirely missing the point. I pulled the raw transmission. Not Yuki's tidy draft. The raw data from the Kal Dominion's border command. The Kal were not a chatty species. Their diplomatic language had 17 words for boundary and only 1 for please, which they used primarily in sarcasm. They had been pressing against Veth Space for 6 years. Slow. Methodical. The way water wears down stone. The raw data loaded. 40 seconds. My tea sat untouched. The first line was a standard status request. The second line was also standard. The third line, buried in the middle of a paragraph about observation post rotations, contained a number. I read it once. I read it twice. The number was the Kal Dominion's projected timeline for absorbing the Veth border colonies. Not a negotiation position. Not a threat. An internal planning figure, accidentally attached to a routine transmission because someone in Kal Command had clicked the wrong attachment box. 6 weeks. I put the mug down. I pulled up the Veth border colony population figures. 3 million people across 7 agricultural worlds. Quiet. Patient. The kind of species that answered aggression with carefully worded notes and believed that rationality would eventually prevail. 6 weeks. Yuki was watching me from her desk. I said, "Cancel the acknowledgement." She did not ask why. Yuki was good at reading the difference between a change of plans and a change of reality. I opened a different channel. One that did not officially exist in the platform's contact directory. A frequency that ran on a relay I had installed myself 6 months ago after reading enough Kal internal communications to understand that the water was already at the wall. The first call was to a woman named Admiral Soraya Ven. She commanded the rapid response group stationed at the edge of human space, running exercises that everyone pretended were routine. I had served with Soraya for 9 years. She answered on the first signal. I said, "Pull your group to full readiness. I'll explain in 15. Start movement protocols now." She said, "How many ships?" I said, "All of them." The tea was very cold. I drank it anyway. The second call was to Fleet Commander Idris Mbeki, who ran Earth's forward logistics and whose voice, when he answered, had the particular flatness of a man who had been woken from the first good sleep he'd had in weeks. I gave him the number. 6 weeks. 3 million people. A Kal internal planning document that was not supposed to exist outside their command structure. He said, "You understand this is not a distress call. The Veth have not asked for help." I said, "The Veth have not asked for help because the Veth do not yet know the Kal have stopped negotiating." He was quiet for 3 seconds. Then, "What do you need?" "Full mobilization staging. Tier 1 intervention classification. 48-hour window." He laughed. Not because it was funny. Because 48 hours from cold to full deployment was the kind of timeline that broke supply chains and ended careers. Then I sent him the number. He stopped laughing. I'll pull from 6 depots, he said. Pull from 9. That will flag every budget review in the division. Good. Let them flag. By the time anyone finishes reading the alerts, the ships will already be in transit. That was the thing about bureaucracies. They moved slowly when they were following procedure. They moved like a collapsing building when the procedure was already written, just waiting for someone with enough nerve to sign the first page. The third call was to a woman named Lena Park in the UNISC Legal Division. She was the best living human at writing orders that were technically unassailable while also being, in practical terms, a declaration of intent wrapped in passive voice. I told her what I needed. She said, "You are asking me to draft authorization for a preemptive deployment into foreign space based on an accidentally attached internal document." I said, "I am asking you to draft it very well." She was quiet for a moment. Then, the Veth have a festival next month. Harvest celebration. I read it in their cultural briefing. I said, "I know." She said, 3 million people should get to have their festival. Then she started typing. I made 6 more calls in the next 30 minutes. My tea was abandoned. My report was still 1 sentence long. Yuki had stopped pretending to do other work and was watching me with the expression of someone taking mental notes for a memoir she hoped never to write. I opened the raw transmission again. The number was still there. 6 weeks. I thought about the call word for species that had not yet understood they were small. They used it for humans. They used it for the Veth. They had been using it for a long time. I closed the transmission. I opened a new document. I typed 3 words, received, noted, filed. Then I started writing the after-action report. I always wrote it before the action. It kept the shape of the thing clear in my head. Somewhere behind me, the platform hummed. Below, Veth space turned in its slow, patient orbit. 3 million people had no idea that 6 weeks had just become 48 hours. And somewhere in the dark between stars, the first ships were already beginning to move. The Veth liaison arrived at my office 14 minutes after I sent the first deployment order. Her name was Thessaly, or as close as human phonemes could approximate. She was young for a Veth diplomatic attaché, which meant she was either exceptionally competent or had been posted here because someone wanted her out of the way. I had never decided which. She did not sit down. She stood in the doorway with her head frills pressed flat, the Veth posture for I have been informed of something and am still deciding how alarmed to be. "You are moving ships," she said. "Yes." "Into Veth space." "Not yet." "Near Veth space." "There is a difference." Her frills shifted. The Veth had a micro-expression for that is not as reassuring as you think it is. I had learned to read it 6 months ago, after the 3rd time the call adjusted their patrol patterns. I pulled up the raw transmission. I pointed at the number. 6 weeks. I pointed at the call internal language surrounding it, phrases that translated to absorption protocol and population redistribution framework. Thessaly went very still. "This is an internal document," she said. "Yes." "You are not supposed to have it." "No." "You are using it to justify fleet movement that has not been requested by my government." I looked at her for a moment. I thought about the Harvest Festival. I thought about 3 million people who had never heard the call word for small. "Thessaly," I said, "your government has spent 6 years responding to call encroachment with carefully worded notes. The call stopped reading the notes 18 months ago. They are now planning the timeline for your colony's absorption in internal command documents." I paused. "You did not send a distress call because your diplomatic protocols do not have a word for help that does not sound like weakness. I understand that. But I am not your government. I do not need a formal request." She said, very quietly, "What do you need?" "For you to go back to your office and file a routine report that says the human liaison is behaving within expected parameters. Then wait 40 hours. For what?" I looked at the deployment clock on my screen. 41 hours until the first wave reached the Veth border. "For the call to understand," I said, "that the word they have been using for us is no longer accurate." Thessaly stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then she nodded once, turned, and walked away. Her frills were still flat. I went back to the after-action report. The shape of it was clear now. I just had to live through the part before the conclusion. Outside the platform window, the stars did nothing in particular. 41 hours. I poured fresh tea. It was going to get cold again. Hour 38. The platform's long-range sensors picked up the first jump signature at 3:11. I was not sleeping. I had not slept in 2 days. Yuki had brought me a blanket at some point, which was folded neatly over the back of my chair and which I had not touched. The tea on my desk was from 3 pots ago. I did not remember making any of them. The first signature was a scout vessel. Small, fast, the kind of ship that arrives before the rest to confirm that the path is clear. Its transponder broadcast UNISC military codes on the emergency channel, a deliberate choice. We were not hiding. Thessaly appeared in my doorway again. She did not knock. She had stopped knocking 18 hours ago, after the second wave of deployment orders went out and her government sent her a carefully worded inquiry that translated roughly to explain the human fleet or explain your continued employment. "That's one," she said. "Yes. How many will there be?" I looked at the deployment clock. 47 primary vessels. 4 carrier groups. Support infrastructure. She sat down. Not in the chair across from my desk. On the floor. With her back against the wall. It was such an un-Veth thing to do. Veth did not sit on floors. They had ceremonial cushions for moments of contemplation, that I understood immediately how tired she was. "My government is calling yours," she said. "Formal protest. Unauthorized military presence. Violation of territorial protocols." I know. They mean it. I know they mean it. They are supposed to mean it. If they did not protest, the call would know something was wrong. She looked at me. Her frills were at an angle I had not seen before. Curious. Almost vulnerable. "You planned for my government's protest," she said. I did not answer. The second jump signature appeared on the screen. Then a third. Then 5 more in rapid succession. Thessaly watched the numbers climb. She said, very quietly, "What else did you plan for?" I picked up my tea. It was cold. I drank it anyway. "Everything," I said. "I planned for everything except the thing that is about to happen." "Which is?" The display lit up with 17 new signatures simultaneously. The vanguard had arrived. 47 ships. 4 carrier groups. Moving into formation with the kind of geometric precision that looks like a threat until you realize it is something else entirely. I said, "The Kal are about to discover that their models for human behavior are missing a variable." "What variable?" Outside the window, the first human warship slid into view. It was very large. It was very quiet. It was holding position exactly where the Kal's outermost patrol route would pass in 20 minutes. I said, "They forgot to calculate for courtesy." Thessaly did not ask what I meant. 20 minutes later, she found out. The Kal patrol vessel arrived at 3:31 exactly. On schedule. Predictable. The way the Kal did everything, by the numbers, by the plan, by the assumption that the universe would continue to cooperate with their calculations. It stopped when it saw the fleet. Not because the fleet fired. Not because the fleet moved. Because the fleet was already there. 47 ships. 4 carrier groups. Arrayed in perfect silence across the patrol route like a door that had been closed in advance. I watched on the display. The Kal vessel's transponder flickered, a hesitation in its automated reporting. Somewhere on that bridge, a commander was looking at a wall of human warships and asking the same question the Kal had asked themselves for 6 years. What are they doing here? The difference was, this time, they did not have a word for the answer. My comm opened. A Kal voice, translated flatly by the platform system, "Unknown human vessels. You are in restricted space. Identify your purpose immediately." I keyed the channel. "This is Senior Observer Samir Kolo, United Earth External Affairs. We are not in restricted space. We are holding position outside your patrol boundary. You are welcome to verify." Silence. 4 seconds. Then, "Your formation is significant." I said, "Yes, it is." The Kal commander tried again. "The Veth have not requested external military support." I looked at Thessaly. She was still on the floor, watching the display with an expression I could not name. I said into the comm, "The Veth do not need to request. We are here because 3 million people have a harvest festival next month. We intend for them to have it." Another silence. Longer this time. Then the call vessel's transponder shifted. Not retreating. Not advancing. Waiting. The same posture the Veth had used for 6 years, the hope that patience would solve what action could not. But we were not Veth. We had never been Veth. I said, "You have 6 hours to begin withdrawal from Veth border space. 6 hours is a courtesy. It is not a negotiation." The call commander said, "And if we do not withdraw?" I looked at the folder on my desk. The one with the internal call document. The one with the number. The one with every timestamp, every communication, every piece of evidence that history would need if the call made the wrong choice. I said, "Then we will update your file." I closed the channel. Thessaly stood up slowly. She looked at the display. The call vessel had not moved. Neither had the fleet. The silence between them was the loudest thing I had ever heard. She said, "You really would have done it. All of it." I picked up my cold tea. "We did do it. We are doing it. Right now." Outside, the first call ship began to turn. Not toward the fleet. Away. Toward the border. Toward home. One by one, the others followed. I sat back. I finished the tea. Yuki appeared in the doorway with a fresh pot and a question in her eyes. I nodded. She poured. Thessaly said, "The festival is in 3 weeks." I said, "I know." She said, "You should come." I looked at the display. The fleet was already beginning its own withdrawal, slow, deliberate, unhurried. We had come. We had been seen. Now we were leaving. That was the part the call would spend years trying to understand. I said, "Send me the coordinates." Thessaly smiled. It was the first time I had seen a Veth make that expression. It looked good on her. I picked up my pen. The after-action report was almost finished. I knew how it ended now. 3 million people had their festival. The call found a new word for us. I was not there to hear what it was. But the tea was warm. The harvest festival happened on schedule. I know because Thessaly sent me a recording. 3 million Veth, standing in fields that had not been burned, under skies that had not darkened, singing songs that had been sung for generations. The camera panned across the crowd at one point and paused on a section of children holding small paper ships painted human colors. Blue and gold. The colors of the fleet that had arrived from nowhere. I watched it 3 times. Then I closed the file and went back to work. The Call Dominion submitted a formal inquiry 6 weeks later. They wanted to know the human fleet's doctrinal basis for intervening in a territorial dispute that did not involve Earth. I drafted the response myself. It was 1 sentence long. We received a signal that something was wrong. They did not write back. The study they commissioned, on the nature of human response capability and the implications for call expansion policy, was leaked to me by a source I still do not identify. It ran 400 pages. Its conclusion was 2 sentences. The first sentence recommended that the call revise their threat assessment models to include a category they had previously considered unnecessary. The second sentence was the category name. It translated as, "Species that do not ask permission to care." I filed the study in the folder. The folder was very thick now. It lived in the bottom drawer of my desk, next to a tea mug that Yuki had bought me as a joke. The mug said I saved 3 million people and all I got was this lukewarm tea. I used it every day. Thessaly was promoted. Her government decided that someone who could maintain effective liaison with unpredictable humans was too valuable to leave on a border platform. She sent me a message before she left. It said, in careful, formal Veth diplomatic English, "The children still draw the ships. I do not correct them when they add too many." I did not correct her either. I am still at the platform. The tea is still usually cold. Yuki still drafts acknowledgments I never send. The Call have pulled back to their original boundaries and are staying there, for now. The Veth have started repairing the observation posts they had let fall into disrepair. The galaxy continues to turn. But sometimes, late at night, When the platform is quiet and the tea is fresh and the screens show nothing but empty space and patient stars, I open the bottom drawer. I take out the folder. I look at the first page, the accidental transmission, the number, the 6 weeks that became 48 hours. And I think about what the call study said. Not the official conclusion. The footnote. The one the censors missed. It said, the humans arrived with 47 ships. They brought documentation for 48. They prepared for a war they did not start and a future they did not control. This is not strategy. This is something else. We do not have a word for it yet. I closed the folder. I put it back in the drawer. I poured fresh tea. Somewhere out there, 3 million people were planning next year's festival. They did not know I had saved the recording on a personal drive. They did not need to. That was the thing about the work. You did it. You filed it. You moved on. And every once in a while, you let yourself watch a video of children holding paper ships, and you remembered why the tea being cold had never really mattered. Yuki knocked on my doorframe. Sir, new signal. Tier 3. Colony requesting medical supplies. I picked up my mug. Send the form, I said. And tell them we will be there. She nodded. She was already typing. Outside the window, the stars were doing nothing in particular. That was fine. They did not need to do anything. We were doing enough. I finished my tea. It was warm. For once.